This is steps to becoming a pro MMA fighter, Swaino's edition. So let's get underway. As you can see in the background, that is my first ever MMA fight as an amateur. I was 17 here and it would have been in 2018. Let's get into it. First steps is finding a gym. Now, this is, I'd say, one of the most important parts. You want to look at two things really. You want to look, is the coach produced a lot of good fighters? Is there good fighters at that gym? And do they teach you? Because you're here because you want to become a pro fighter. They're the two aspects you need to look into. If you were here for a hobby, it'd be a little bit slightly different. If you're there to lose weight, it's going to be slightly different. But if you're wanting to be a pro fighter, first off, it's got to have fighters. If the gym don't have fighters, don't even fucking bother. Because you want people you can look up to, you want better fighters there so then you can get better quickly. The second thing is making sure they're teaching you. You don't want to be getting taught absolute bullshit like Krav Maga or all that crap because it's not going to help. Next step after that, we've got to get stuck in. And by stuck in, I mean go out your comfort zone. You're not going to be comfortable going into a fighter's gym. The first step is taking the first step through the front door. That's the hardest step to take. And if you're wanting to be a fighter, the first thing you just got to do is get stuck in. You're going to get things wrong. People are going to be better than you. People are going to beat you up. And this is why it is so important. And I mean so important to drop the ego. You might be the biggest there. You might have the biggest biceps. But I guarantee there's going to be a nerd on that mat who plays Lego in the spare time that's going to beat the living shit out of you. So drop the ego and don't judge a book by its cover, because that is MMA. Next step, once you feel comfortable in knowing your knowledge, I recommend sparring. Sparring does not have to be hard. It's not a fight. This is where we're going to learn. But you're never going to be comfortable sparring at the start. You just got to do it over and over again. And after you start doing it more frequently, it'll start being more comfortable, more second nature. And that's the main thing with this. This is to learn. Remember, sparring is not a fight. So if you want to be a pro MMA fighter, and you want to do this for the rest of your life, don't be fighting every bloody spar, because you're going to end up punch drunk and your career's going to be gone. After you've done sparring with people, into clubs. I had my first interclub in Thai boxing. That's how I started. My first interclub was at Kia Pontit in Leeds. And it's my first experience of sparring against a randomer. It's not quite a fight level. I did 3 1-minute rounds. To me, looking back, that is baby standard. But it's what you got to do to get there. And don't get me wrong, I was fucking knackered by the end of it. But it's a great way to spar people that you've never, ever sparred against. Because you can get in a habit of being, I'd say, less cautious, just because you know what they're going to do, you know their game. Whereas when you go to an interclub, this is where it's sparring bounce against other gyms, similar weight, you're going to have to be a bit more cautious because you've never sparred that person ever. And that's how a fight is at the end of the day. It is having a fight with someone that you never trained with ever. So you got to have that sense of unknown. That's why interclubs, very, very good. Try and get a few out of these. Bash a few out, because I find once you've started having fights, you don't want to go back to that interclub stage. You want to bash these out. Next after that is getting a fight booked. Yes, there's all this sort of training underneath and that you got to do, but these are the main key points. And that first fight, you are never, ever going to be ready. I remember taking my first fight. It was in May 2017, 2017, May 27th it was. It was Thai boxing. I was absolutely shitting myself. I didn't feel ready one bit. Not one bit. But I've got no regrets whatsoever at taking that fight. And that's because you learn so much. And that's the main thing out of fighting for amateur. It's literally having a fight and learning from it. Because I guarantee, and I guarantee everything that you do in that training room, you're not going to be able to replicate that into a fight because you're going to forget half the things. My first fight, I jabbed and I low kicked. And that was it. That was it. And I was fucked. Absolutely fucked. Minute and a half rounds. 2 rounds, I was gone. The last 3 rounds, I had nothing in me. But it was a learning experience and I learned things from there. The main thing I learned from there is I've got to try a little bit harder in training, because when someone's going to punch you in the face 100%, it's a little bit different of a ball game than when you go in 50. So I knew I had to push myself harder in the sprints, harder into my pad rounds, harder into the bag work, because no one's going to save me at the end of the day in that ring at the time, because I wasn't doing MMA then. And then it's just repeating the process. So for me personally, I did a few Thai fights and then I went into MMA after that. You can see the picture here. That was my first MMA fight. That was February 2018. Your record, it does not matter. That's what I can't emphasise enough. In MMA, for amateur, if you could, fight every fucking week. Fight. Wrestling comp, jiu-jitsu comp. Even if karate is your sort of style, do a few karate things. Much experience you can get, the better. Because when you go pro, I'm now pro. I might have 3 or 4 fights a year. I've not got that in between. When you're amateur, nothing matters. No one gives a crap. You might think they care at the time, but as soon as you turn pro, no one gives a fuck about my amateur record anymore. All they care about is your professional. That's when you go to the UFC. Don't shout out your amateur record. They shout out your professional record. So amateur, take the hardest fights and get as much experience as you can. The best fights that I took part in was the ones I learnt the most from, because that made me grow as a fighter. And usually, they were the hardest ones, not the easy ones. Don't cut weight. Don't cut loads of weight, because if you're cutting 6 kilo the week of the fight at amateur, there's no way you're going to be able to fight in 2 weeks' time, because you're cutting weight over and over again. You're going to be yo-yoing. So this is going to make a massive, massive part, especially in your early days of amateur, because if they see it in the UFC, people tend to think they have to do it. But my biggest advice to young fighters or any sort of fighters that just want to get experience, don't cut weight. Just do it at your weight class, because it's just going to save you so much energy and you're going to be able to learn so much more. Because remember, these don't matter. This is just experience for your knowledge bank. It's not to gloat about what sort of record you have to all your mates at school or at work. Spend a few years getting that experience. Don't try and rush the process. You're going to turn pro when your coach feels that you're ready, when you feel that you're ready. So spend a few years getting this experience. My first fight in Thai boxing was at 17. My first fight in MMA, well, I was 17 as well. My pro MMA debut was 22. So that is 5 years. If you want to go proper close into it, it's 4.5 years it was. From my first ever fight to turning pro. And that gave me a lot of time to get fights out. I think I probably had 25 potentially, 25 fights in between, and I wish I had more. I had 8 Thai, I had 10 MMA, I had 1 boxing, and then I did a few competitions as well. It probably didn't add up to 25, but it's around that ballpark. I wish I had so much more, because now I'm pro. It's too late to do that, and that's my biggest thing. Is get experience, because that is what's going to help you in the later stages of your career. Now, there's a little bit different between your early days of amateur and your later days as amateur. Your later days of amateur, you're in your final couple fights, and then you're going to go pro. So what I recommend to people, if you've got the money, it's very good to do this. I think go abroad. Go spar some good randomers, pros and amis. Because number one, you know what level you're at. You know what they're fighting at. And if you're competing against them in the spars, you know you're at a similar sort of level. And I found for myself, It was great from a mindset. Absolutely great. The reason for this is, in a fight, you never, ever know who you're going to fight. As in, you don't know what they're going to do on the day. Styles are different. Yes, you can watch studies and clips, but if you've not sparred them before, it can be a little bit harder to read them in a fight. If you go away and you're sparring randomers, for example, I was at Phuket Top Team and Tiger Muay Thai. You get new people in the gym every single day. You're sparring different people every single day. So that means you're sparring different styles every single day. So you're getting those reads on those styles that you're not quite used to. And this helps for your mindset because then it improves your whole game as a whole and makes you more well-rounded for going against different styles for when you go professional. And it defo did for me when I stood my ground with a UFC fighter when I was 18 years of age and I've been doing the sport 2 years. It defo grew some pubes on my fucking nuts because I thought I was the man. And that's what it's going to do. You're going to spar these better guys and you're going to be like, I'm close. I'm close. I defo did. I've sparred Rafa Fiez. I did 5 rounds hard in the cage and I thought, I wasn't even professional then. I thought, I'm close to his level here. I'm pretty close. And I'm not even a professional yet. And that's what happens when you get this experience. And mindset's everything in this game. So if you can sort this out, I find by going abroad, travelling different gyms, sparring so many different people, it's going to help so much. Your last few AMI fights though, it's time to, I think, stop doing it for the purpose of experience, but the purpose of getting you ready for your pro debut. Last few AMI fights, let's say 2 or 3. You want to start finding your style. There's so many different styles in MMA. You could be a wrestler, you could be a jits person, you could be a boxer, you could be a striker, you could just like keeping the distance, you could like brawling. But this is where I struggled to do this in my amateur career. And I only really started to find my style in, I'd say, the last fight or last 2 fights. I wish I could have got it a little bit earlier. But finding your style preps you for when you're going pro. Because when you go pro, you don't want to start playing these guessing games. You want to start doing what works for you. And for me, what worked for me is my kicks, if you've seen me fight, obviously. My leg kicks, my calf kicks, my forward pressure as well, and just being able to grind it. Sometimes I'd go for shots that wasn't necessary to go for shots. So I had to work out my style and use it for that. As well as that, I love taking people down and beating them up, not trying to hold them down. So I kind of found my style within MMA, and it probably took me a little bit longer than what I wanted, just because I was looking at all these different fighters and trying to take bits from them. But really, I never really thought, what do I want to do? And that's what it is at the end of the day. What do you want to do in that cage? But you got to drill all your training towards that. Then after this, how I said don't cut weight, I think in your last 2 amateur fights, you probably should start looking to cut weight properly. Maybe last 3 amateur fights. Because you don't want to fuck that up when you go pro. You want to start using the procedures so you're ready when you go pro. Because if you fuck it up when you're an amateur, no biggie, it was an amateur. Maybe you took the wrong weight class, you lost because of it because you were knackered after 1 round. But if you do that when you're pro, you're pretty fucked then. Because now your record's done. Imagine if you do that 3 times in a row, you're 0-3. It's going to be hard to get that record back for those big promotions. And with this, find someone that's done it before and get a little bit of advice. That's what I can say. And don't try and starve yourself on fight week. But that is a completely separate video. And after that, fight the best amateurs in the country. The best. Don't avoid no one. If you can afford it, do the IMAFs, go to abroad and fight people in the best countries there in America. Do it. Fight the best and nothing but the best. If you lose, you might be gutted. You might have to tell your mates, I've lost. But what you are going to gain is the knowledge and the experience and the lessons. And that is going to prep you for the professional ranks. try and look at it as if you're going to put some food in the oven. What do you normally do before you put it in the oven? You preheat it. So preheating the oven is your amateur career. And when you put it into the oven, that is your later stages of your amateur career. But when you take it out the oven and it's the finished product, that is when you are going pro. And after that, it is the final steps. Get your pro debut booked. Get it booked, get it in the diary, get all your mates down, sell a load of tickets. And for me, do it in good fashion. Knock them out in style and become a professional certified MMA fighter. And they are my steps for becoming a professional fighter. There is a lot more ins and outs, but that is my basic guide in order to get you from point zero to point pro. So tune in tomorrow for the next video. I will see you then. Bish, bash, bosh.